we have a new user button. So when the new user button's clicked, and then we're also going to have a when login button is clicked. So what we want to do initially for each of these is we want to hide this arrangement. So we're going to set the visibility, and let's make this false. And then also for the login arrangement, we want to set its visibility to true. And let's copy, I'm copying and pasting these. So that will happen for both events. Now the one difference is if it's a new user, we want the second password to show up. If it's not, we want the second password to be invisible. So I want to, both the label and the text box, we're going to set their visibility. So in this case, new user, let's, just to be sure, we're not sure of what state we're currently in, so let's make sure that it's visible for a new user, and the password text box too is also going to be visible. And then I'm going to copy these and set them to false. I'm sorry, I got the wrong one here. This should be repeat password label. Repeat password label. So the label and the text box should be true for a new user, the visibility, and the visibility should be false for a user logging in. Okay, so now at this point we're going to make a couple of variables that we're going to use. So one is going to be to save the username. So we're going to initialize this to a blank text box. So the user is going to either log in or sign in with their username. So we need a variable for that. In addition, I want to make another variable called users because I want to be able to look up if it's someone logging in, are they a registered user? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a dictionary. So what is a dictionary? So I've got a couple of blocks here to illustrate. So we have lists, and hopefully you've seen lists before, but lists allow you, instead of a single variable like username, say we wanted a list of usernames, and so we can combine them and refer to them as a single variable, in this case users. So if we have a list, we're limited to, single items. Dictionaries are slightly different. We have a key. In our case, our key will be the username, Sam, and its value is going to be its password, I am Sam. And my second user is Jill, and Jill's password is I love making apps. So what we can easily do with a dictionary is look things up by their key and then check their value. Okay, so we could use lists, but in this case, a dictionary is going to be more versatile for us. So I'm going to get rid of these for now. So let's handle the login situation first. So if a person's logging in, they've already created a username and password previously, and they just want to log in. So what we need to do is to check that their user exists and that the password matches. So I'm actually going to make a procedure here to handle this. Because there will be a decent amount of code, I'm just going to modularize it and put it in its own separate procedure. And then what we can do is call login from the login button. The first thing we want to do is we want to test if, so what we can do here under dictionaries is look for is key in dictionary. Okay, and the key that we're looking for is what they put in the username text box. So username text box.text. So the key is that, and the dictionary is going to be this users. Okay, initially it's going to be empty, so there won't be any user with that name. Once we've determined that yes, the user is in our dictionary of users, the second thing we want to do is match up with another if. What we want to do now is get the value for the key, and we'll just copy and paste this. So again, the key is the username and the dictionary is users. So the value is going to be the password. And we actually want to say, does that equal, just going to move this up out of the way, does that equal the password text box? Okay, so if the password in the dictionary matches what the person has typed in for their password, that means that they've typed in the correct password. If that's the case, then that means that they're a valid user and we're going to proceed. Let's use the notifier, and I'm just going to do show alert and just say successful login. And this is really for our own purposes of debugging. We'll probably get rid of this at a later point. So we're going to alert them, and then what we want to do is set this visibility to false again, because we want to hide this login screen once we've done it. And then the last thing we want to do is set the username to, and I'm copying and pasting this, copying and pasting this, so whatever the user had typed in is going to be the username. We're going to need this later on for if we're adding anything to the form, so we're going to save that in a variable. If the password doesn't match, what I want to do is I'm going to change this to an if then else. So in that case, I want to notify them, hey, you've put in the wrong password. So let's go to notifier. In this case, I want to do a little bit more with a message dialog. So I'm going to bring out text box. So I'm just going to copy and paste that so we have. So the message will be, in this case, it's this if then else, and we want to say incorrect password. And here we'll say error as the title, and the button will just say OK. So it's really just notifying them. And then likewise for this outer if, let's make another else for that. And let's copy and paste this one. And the message will be slightly different. So username not found. So the outer if is that we couldn't find the user in the dictionary. So username not found. Inner if would be that the passwords don't match. The last thing we need to do is to call this procedure. I actually made a mistake previously where I said we were going to call it from login button. Login button is just actually going to bring up the arrangement where they can put in their username and password. We actually want this to come from the submit login button. So once they've entered the username and password, they hit submit. This is where we're going to call login, which is we'll do the checking. So we've coded the login for an existing user. Now we need to actually code the new user feature because in order to test, we're going to need some new users. Let's make a new procedure. So let's do the same thing. We'll call it new user. And what do we need to do in here? In this case, we're going to be testing slightly different things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to collapse this and move this over here so we can see. So in this case, we want to test if, and we want to compare the two password text boxes. So let's say password text box 1, and I'm going to duplicate that, and we'll make this password text box 2. Okay, so if those two things match, we know that at least they've got the two passwords matching. And let's make this into an else. And we know that we can use the notifier and give them a message. So let's do that for the so the title again is going to be error, and we'll say passwords do not match. We'll just do OK. In the case where they do match, though, what we want to do then is to check, does the username already exist? So we're going to have another if. Let's do an if then else because we know we're going to give them an error message. So we might do this, duplicate, and we'll say username already exists. Okay, and what we want to test is, again, if is key in dictionary. And the dictionary is users. And the key is going to be our username text box. So if the key is already in the dictionary, that means that in fact, we want to move this up here. So if it's already there, give them an error. Otherwise, I think we're good to go. So let's first notify them that they've had success. I'm going to use the show message dialog again, so I'll duplicate that. And we want to say success. And we now want them to go through the login process. So they've just made a new user, so we will tell them, please log in with your username and password. We also need to save this user in our dictionary of users. So in the dictionary palette, we are going to look for merge. Merge into dictionary. So we want this where they are successful. So the user will be the dictionary. The users will be the dictionary. And what we're going to merge into that dictionary, we're going to merge in a make dictionary. So we're making a new entry. We only need a single pair, and that pair will include the username as the key and the password, whoops, sorry about that, and the password text box as the value. So we're adding a new entry into the dictionary with the username and the password, and it will be added to our dictionary of users. The other thing we want to do is to clear the username and password fields, so we just want to blank those out. So we've got a username text box, so we want to set the text to an empty text block. Likewise, we want to do that with the password text box 1 and 2. So set this to, and I'm going to copy and paste that, and then I'm going to copy and paste that entire block and change that to password text box 2. So now we have these three things being blanked out. We also want to make the second password text box invisible again because we no longer need that, right? So we're going to set this visibility to false, and we also want to set the visibility of the label to false. And I'll copy and paste that as well. Now we just want to reorient ourselves to everything else that's going on here. So think back to where is new user going to be called from? And that's actually going to be when the user presses the submit login button, right? So currently we have it calling login, but actually there's two cases. Both new user and login will both be pressing the submit button. So we are going to add in an if then else block. In one case, we'll call login. In the other case, we will call new user. Okay, well, what's the case? So let's think about this. So with a new user, that second password text box is visible. With a login, it's not. So let's go find password text box 2, the visible property. And this can be used directly in an if condition. This is a Boolean value. It has the value true or false, so that's what we're testing with an if. So if it's visible, that means a new user. So in fact, let's swap these. So we will call new user in the case of the password text box 2 being visible, and we will call login in the case where it's invisible. Let's also just check to make sure that we've got our settings correct for both cases. So if it's a new user, both the label and password text box 2 should be visible. They're both true, that's correct. And with login, the label and password text box 2 is both invisible, and that's correct. Last thing, we need to tie this back to screen 1. So let's go back to screen 1, and we need to tie the screen in. So we want to, let's just duplicate this, and we want it to be community button. And when they press this, we want to open the forum screen. Okay, so now we should be ready to test. So let's test the new user and login capabilities. So I've got my emulator going. I'm back to my screen 1. We always want to start from screen 1 when we're testing. I'm going to go to community forum. Okay, so now it's come up. I'm going to first try to log in with a username, and it should not exist because we have not set up any users yet for the app. So the other thing that I've now realized is that I have no way to get back to the original screen, right, with the 2 buttons. So what I'm going to do now is go to the designer, and I am going to make this visible just so I can see it. So we need to add a cancel button. So if we cancel, we can go back to the main 2 buttons. So let's add a new button. Luckily, I had made a table arrangement, if you remember, so I'm going to drop that into that cell of the table. I'm going to rename this cancel button, and I'm going to change the text to say cancel. All right, let's go back to the emulator. Luckily, it will refresh with that new button. Oh, and now of course we do have to go back in and code the block, right? So let's go to our new cancel button. When it's clicked, what do we want to do? We want to make the login buttons visible again. So we're going to set the visible property to true. And we want the login arrangement visibility to be false. So we want to hide that. Now let's go back and try this. So if we hit cancel, we go back to the new user. Let me try that again. So I'm going to type in my name again. It should say username not found. Now I can cancel and go back. Now I can go to new user, and if we look, it has filled in my name and password. What we probably want to do is to clear those 3 fields, username, password, and repeat password. So when it comes to the screen, it will always be blank. Note that we had already done that up in the new user. So what I'm going to do, because we're doing this in 2 places, I'm going to make a new procedure. So I'm going to say clear fields. And in that, I'm going to grab those 3 blocks, and I'll put that back there. Now the clear fields procedure will clear those 3 fields. Then what I can do is call clear fields here, and also call it from the cancel button. And while we're here, let's also do this for login. So up here we had collapsed it. I'm going to expand this block. So let's see, when we finish with a successful login, let's also call clear fields, just to make sure that the fields are cleared for any future logins. Let me collapse that again, and let's go back now and try this all out. Okay, let's cancel. I'm going to say new user, and now they're cleared. So that's just what we want. So I'll type in my name again. I'm going to type test for password 1, and I'm going to just type all T's to make sure the 2 passwords don't match, and hopefully we'll get that error message. Right, passwords do not match. Okay. And now I'm going to erase the second one and make it match. So now if I hit submit, success. Please log in with your username and password. Perfect. But now we want to it to take us back to the two buttons. So what I think we need to do is let's look at new user, and when we have a successful login in here, we want to set the visibility again. So we want the button arrangements to be true and the login arrangement visibility to be false. Let's also just check for login, make sure that we've got the right. Let's move things around so we can actually see this and make sure that we've got things correct here. When we have a successful login, we close the login arrangement. And in this case, because we're logging in, we don't want the buttons to show up. We're actually going to go to a third arrangement. So this looks good. Let's try one more time here. So let's go back and cancel. And let's click on new user, Judy, and I'm going to use the same password. So we should have a successful login. Success, please log in with your username and password. Great. Now I will type in Judy and test and successful login. Excellent. Okay, so I think we've got that part of our app working, it appears. Now we can move on to the actual forum. Yay. Let's take a moment here to do another checkpoint. So under my projects, checkpoint, and I'm going to call this forum login. So we know that we've got that part working and we've got a checkpoint at that point.